The day I realized my parents kept breaking into my apartment wasn't the day everything fell apart. It was the day I understood just how far they were willing to go. I'd come home to lights I never turned on food. I never cooked blankets shaped by bodies that weren't mine. Every corner whispered that I wasn't living alone at all. People think family crosses lines out of love. But what if crossing lines becomes the only way they know how to hold you? Because the moment I finally disappeared, that's when the real story began. I wasn't always this cautious. There was a time I believed boundaries were simple. You draw a line, people respect it. But in my family, a line was just something to step over. Maybe that's why at 29 I still flinched when my phone lit up with my mother's name, or when my father's voice slipped into that soft, guilt-laced tone he used whenever he wanted something quietly surrendered. Growing up, privacy was a fantasy I watched other kids enjoy. My bedroom door might as well have been made of glass. Mom Evelyn walked in whenever she pleased, sometimes humming, sometimes silent, always searching. She'd pick up notebooks, skim pages, ask questions masked as concern. "You hide too much," she'd say, though she never stopped to consider why I felt the need to hide at all. Dad Thomas never interfered. He'd shrug, mutter something about keeping the peace, then let her keep going. Meanwhile, my younger sister Liana lived like royalty in a kingdom built from exceptions. Her room was off limits. Her mess was called creativity. Her mistakes were phases. Mine were warnings. Ours was a house with two sets of rules, one lenient, one suffocating, and I grew up knowing exactly which set belonged to me. So when I finally moved out into a one-bedroom apartment overlooking the Denver skyline, I thought I'd crossed some invisible threshold into adulthood. I bought my own dishes, arranged my bookshelf the way I liked, hung soft string lights that made the evenings feel calmer than anything I'd known. I breathed differently there, slower, deeper, as if my lungs finally trusted the air around them. But that peace didn't last long. The first time Mom let herself in, she acted like it was a surprise visit, carrying groceries she never asked if I wanted. She put on an apron she pulled from her purse, and started cooking like she'd been waiting all week for the chance. Dad settled onto my couch, claiming he just wanted to see the view, though his eyes kept drifting to my mail on the counter. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, an overstep she'd correct once I explained. But explaining to my mother had never changed anything before. It didn't now. Then came the smaller violations. Containers moved. Clothes I hadn't worn in months, suddenly in the laundry basket. A faint imprint on my pillow. Liana borrowing my sweater without asking. My laptop screen left open to tabs I didn't recognize. Each incident was small enough to excuse, but together they felt like a tide rising under my feet. I knew the pattern. I'd lived it before. And just like when I was a teenager, my mother called it love, my father called it protection, and I was supposed to call it normal. Except this time it wasn't their house. It was mine. And deep down, I already sensed something I wasn't brave enough to admit yet. If I didn't stop them soon, they'd take this place from me too. One unlocked door, one excuse, one intrusion at a time. The shift didn't happen all at once. It was slow, quiet, like a draft slipping through a window you thought was sealed. I'd come home from work and notice something barely off a cabinet left open. Spices rearranged my folded towels, suddenly stacked edge out instead of edge in. Harmless things, easy to dismiss. But that's how my mother worked. Not with storms, but with breezes that eventually became winds strong enough to push you back into place. One Thursday evening, I returned to find my refrigerator reorganized the way she used to do it at home, produce on-top proteins in the middle temptation foods tucked behind everything else. The frozen meals I bought for busy weeks were gone. In their place sat jars of her soups, her dressings, her preferences, a curated life, hers not mine. I stood there with the cold air spilling out, realizing I wasn't imagining any of this. I was being managed. Then there was Liana. She treated my apartment like a bonus level in a video game she already owned. I'd catch traces of her everywhere. Mascara smudges near my mirror, half-finished iced coffee cups in my sink clothes tossed over the back of my chair. When I confronted her, she'd laugh it off. "Relax, Riley. You act like I'm a stranger." She always said it like I was unreasonable, like the problem wasn't her crossing lines, but me wanting them respected. But the moment that snapped the last thread of denial came 2 weeks later. I walked in after a long day, hoping for silence, only to find my laptop open on the coffee table. Pages of notes I hadn't written sat on the screen, searches I didn't make, windows I didn't open. And then, as if to leave proof, one of my project drafts sat half-clicked, as though someone had started reading but got bored halfway through. My chest tightened. I called my mom. She picked up immediately. "Oh, sweetheart, don't be dramatic," she said when I asked if she'd been there. "Your landlord let me in. I told him you hadn't been answering me and I was worried." "Honestly, you should be grateful someone's looking out for you." Something inside me iced over. "Mom," I whispered, "you lied to get into my home." "That's not lying. It's concern. You work too hard. You isolate. You need support." Support. That word felt like a trap closing. After we hung up, I sat on the floor, back against the couch, letting the weight of everything settle. Every memory from childhood, the open journals, the monitored texts, the tracked locations flooded back in one suffocating wave. This wasn't new. This was the same pattern, revived and emboldened. The next morning, I couldn't focus at work. I booked a therapy session during lunch. My therapist listened, then leaned forward and said gently, "Riley, this isn't concern. It's enmeshment. These aren't accidents. They're boundary violations." It was the first time someone named what I'd been too scared to articulate. "Your home isn't safe," she added softly. "Not emotionally, not psychologically. You need distance they can't override." I walked out into the cold Denver air with one thought repeating like a heartbeat. If I stay here, they'll never stop. Once the truth settled, the kind of truth that doesn't knock but barges straight through your chest, I knew staying meant surrendering. My therapist's words kept echoing. You need distance they can't override. She didn't mean a conversation or a firmer tone or another doomed attempt at setting boundaries. She meant escape. Real, physical, trace-proof distance. So I did something I never imagined doing. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, opened my laptop, and typed 4 words into the search bar: secure apartment buildings, Denver. Scrolling through listings, I realized how small my world had been. I had spent years believing privacy was a privilege other people got to enjoy. But that night, for the first time, privacy felt like something I could choose. I found a building downtown, keycard access, staffed lobby cameras in every hallway, elevators that required authorization just to move. A place where no one could charm their way inside, not even my mother. I scheduled a tour for the next morning. The moment I stepped into the lobby, I knew. The warm lighting, the quiet hum of air vents, the polished floors reflecting the city lights. It felt like a place built for people who needed walls as much as they needed air. The leasing agent showed me a corner unit with tall windows and a locked balcony. I stood there, imagining a silence that belonged solely to me. I signed the lease before my fear could talk me out of it. The move had to happen in secret. No chance for my mother to guilt me, no space for Liana to turn it into a spectacle. Just action. Clean, irreversible action. Mara and Jonah offered to help the moment I told them, showing up after midnight with hoodies and gloves like we were planning a heist. "Tell me again why we're whispering," Jonah murmured as we taped boxes. "Because if they show up," I whispered back, "I won't be able to leave." We packed everything, clothes, books, kitchenware, quietly, methodically. I left behind anything that felt too recognizable. Mugs my mom bought for my own good sweaters, Liana claimed were hers, until she felt generous. Frames Dad insisted I hang to make the place feel like home. I wanted nothing they could claim. At 2 a.m, the moving truck rumbled softly outside. We loaded my life in the dark, each trip down the hallway feeling like a countdown. When the truck pulled away, I locked the door one last time and slid the emergency key my mother once waved like a badge into an envelope addressed to the landlord. No explanation. No forwarding address. At the new building, the night staff checked my ID, handed me a sleek black key card, and welcomed me by name. That small gesture felt like a quiet revolution. As I stepped into my new apartment, the door clicking shut behind me, one line formed sharply in my mind, so I moved without telling them. Not out of spite, not out of rebellion, but because disappearing was the only way to finally become visible to myself. For the first 3 days in my new apartment, I kept my phone on silent and turned face down. I let the world shrink to the steady hum of the building, the soft echo of my footsteps on hardwood floors, the unfamiliar comfort of knowing every sound inside these walls came from me and only me. I slept without jolting awake. I cooked without wondering who would rearrange my ingredients when I wasn't looking. It felt like oxygen I hadn't breathed in years, but peace in my family never lasted long. On the morning of day 4, I finally flipped my phone over. The screen lit up like a warning flare, dozens of missed calls, frantic texts, voicemails stacked with timestamps only minutes apart. My mother, my father, Liana. Even numbers I didn't recognize, likely neighbors from my old building. Riley answer immediately. "This isn't funny. Where are you? We're coming. Call us. Right now." And then Liana's post on social media. "My sister is missing. Please pray she comes home." Missing. The irony almost made me laugh, but the longer I scrolled, the more I sensed this wasn't just panic, it was spiraling. I set the phone down, trying to slow my breathing when it rang again. Unknown number. Something told me to pick up. "Is this Riley Morgan?" a calm voice asked. "Yes, this is Officer Ramirez with the Denver Police Department. Are you safe at the moment?" My stomach dropped, but my voice stayed steady. "I am. I'm calling because members of your family were involved in an incident at your former residence. We need you to come down to the station to verify a few details." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. "What happened? They attempted to enter your old apartment," she said carefully. "The tenants inside believed it was a break-in." "Of course they did. My family didn't knock. They never had." "I'll come right away," I said. When I entered the station, the fluorescent lights hummed over rows of chairs, the scent of stale coffee drifting from somewhere behind the front desk. A receptionist directed me to a small conference room, and as I stepped inside the scene, hit me like a slap. My mother sat at the table, mascara smudged, tears streaking her cheeks in uneven lines. My father hovered beside her, jaw-clenched eyes darting toward the doorway as I appeared, and Liana paced in the corner, arms folded, her face blotchy from crying or from being caught. It was hard to tell. The moment my mother saw me, she gasped, standing so abruptly her chair screeched against the floor. "Riley! Oh my God, where have you been? We thought you were dead." Her voice trembled, but beneath the panic I recognized something else. Accusation, as if my disappearance had been a personal attack against her. I didn't move closer. "I'm fine," I said quietly. "You shouldn't have been at my apartment." "That's not your apartment anymore," my father muttered, as if that somehow justified it. Officer Ramirez entered, then calm and steady. "Let's all sit," she said. My mother sniffled dramatically and collapsed back into her chair, clutching tissues like props. I remained standing until the officer motioned me into the seat across from them. "Ms. Morgan," she began, "we need to clarify your whereabouts and well-being because your family reported you missing." "I wasn't missing," I said. "I moved." "You moved." My mother repeated, her voice breaking. "Without telling us, without telling me." Her hurt tone would have gutted me once. Now it sounded like a familiar trap being sprung. "Yes," I answered simply. Liana rolled her eyes. "You're being ridiculous, Riley. If you had just told us, none of this would have happened." Officer Ramirez cleared her throat. "Let's revisit what did happen. According to the tenants and witnesses, your family attempted to force entry into a unit that wasn't theirs." "That's a lie," my mother snapped. "We thought Riley was inside. We were trying to save her." By climbing onto someone's balcony, the officer asked evenly. Liana shifted uncomfortably. I slipped. It wasn't like a break-in. My father rubbed his temple. "We were desperate. Our daughter vanished. What were we supposed to think?" "You're supposed to respect her privacy," the officer said. "She's an adult. Her absence is not a crime." Their silence landed like weight on the table. I inhaled. "I moved because you wouldn't stop entering my home." My mother's head whipped toward me. "We only went inside to help you. You lied to my landlord," I reminded her. "You told him I was unstable, so he'd let you in." She flinched at the word lied, but recovered quickly. "I was worried. You read my things. You reorganized my home. You gave Liana a key." Liana scoffed. "Oh, please. You act like I stole something. You stole my space," I said, "my safe place." Officer Ramirez folded her hands. "Ms. Morgan, would you like to formally document these boundary concerns?" my mother gasped. "Document. She's our daughter." "And you're trespassers," the officer replied calmly, intentional or not. The words hit my family harder than anything I'd said. My father leaned forward. "Riley, come on. We made mistakes, but involving the police—" "You involved them," I said gently, "not me. And let them face the police." The line from my thumbnail, the line that defined everything, settled over the room like a truth none of them could escape. My mother's lips trembled. "I can't believe you do this to us." I met her eyes. "I didn't do anything to you. I just stopped letting you do things to me." Silence. Heavy. Necessary. Officer Ramirez slid a form across the table. "Given the circumstances, I recommend a written boundary agreement. It's not a restraining order, but it documents expectations moving forward." My mother stared at it like it was a death sentence. I kept my voice steady. "Here are my terms. 3 simple lines. You will not come to my new home. We only meet in public places. You do not access my personal belongings accounts or mail ever." My father frowned. "That's extreme." "No," I said softly. "It's adulthood." For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, with the reluctance of people, realizing the world no longer bends for them, my parents signed. Liana signed last, eyebrows, tight jaw set, understanding finally dawning in her expression. When the paper slid back to me, the signature shimmering slightly in the overhead light, something inside my chest untangled, something that had been twisted for years. My mother whispered, "I miss when you needed us." I gathered the papers calmly. "You can still be in my life. You just can't be in my home." Officer Ramirez nodded approvingly. And as I walked out of the station, the cold Denver air wrapped around me like a clean slate. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Freedom, earned, chosen, undeniable. The days after the police station felt unusually quiet, like the world had finally stopped pressing against my skin. In my new apartment, the mornings were slow and gentle. I'd open the blinds and let the Denver sunlight spill across the hardwood floors, a reminder that this space, this peace belonged entirely to me. No unexpected footsteps, no rearranged spices, no lingering fear that someone had crossed a line while I was gone. My family kept their distance just as they agreed. We met only in neutral places, a quiet cafe near Union Station, where the tables were small and the boundaries were unmistakable. My mother arrived carefully now, as if stepping into a room where the rules had changed, and she wasn't sure which ones applied to her anymore. My father listened more than he spoke, and Liana surprisingly softened. The embarrassment of facing the police matured her in ways lectures never had. None of us pretended things were perfect, but for the first time they treated my space, emotional and physical, as something real, something valid. And as the weeks passed, I felt myself expanding into the life I'd pushed aside for years. I breathed deeper. I slept fully. I existed without bracing for impact. Sometimes, healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's the simple sound of a locked door staying locked. Looking back, leaving wasn't the punishment they always assumed it was. It was the first time I chose myself without apology. My family still exists in my life, just at a distance that finally lets me breathe. And if you've ever had to fight for your own space, for the right to feel safe in the place you call home, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments and subscribe if you want more stories like this.